A door creaked open, and Sergio felt the cold wind from the street invade the small apartment. His eyes fixated on the figure of the girl, lost amid the snow, her lips trembling from the chill. She shouldn't be there, so fragile and alone, in a city where the unknown lurks around every corner. Without thinking twice, Sergio pulled her inside, his eyes meeting hers, trying to understand the mystery unfolding before him. Something within him whispered that this night would change everything, but he had no idea of the extent of the shadows approaching, nor the secrets buried long ago that were about to resurface. The girl who changed everything, how a lost child revealed secrets that should never have been told. Sergio closed the door behind him. The biting wind still seemed to whistle in his ears, bringing with it the distant sounds of horns and hurried footsteps. The girl was shaking uncontrollably, her wide, confused eyes as if she were waking from a nightmare. He couldn't shake the feeling that this encounter was more than mere coincidence. "What's your name?" he asked softly, trying not to frighten her more than she already was. The girl hesitated, her dark eyes scanning Sergio's face in search of safety. "Laura," she murmured, almost as if she had forgotten her own identity. "Laura, you're cold. Let's go inside. My mom will take care of you," he said, trying to sound confident as he led her further into the apartment. Sergio's mother, Amelia, was sitting in her usual chair, wrapped in a thick shawl, her attentive eyes following every move of her son. There was something dark about her presence, an energy that always made Sergio feel a growing discomfort, but he quickly pushed that thought aside. Now, the important thing was that girl. Nayeli, the nurse, stood beside Amelia, adjusting the pillows, but paused when she saw the girl. "Who is she, Sergio?" Nayeli's voice was gentle, but it carried a note of surprise and perhaps a hint of concern. "I found her on the street. She was lost and covered in snow. She needs a warm place to stay until we can find her parents," Sergio replied, looking at his mother, waiting for some reaction. Amelia frowned, her gaze seeming to pierce through the girl. "Children shouldn't wander around alone. That's never a good sign." Sergio felt a chill, but ignored it. He helped Laura sit on the couch and wrapped her in a blanket. The girl seemed lost in her thoughts, her eyes fixed on some distant point, as if something much deeper was consuming her. "Do you want something to eat, Laura?" Nayeli asked softly, kneeling beside her. Laura nodded, but her hands trembled as she took the bowl of soup Nayeli brought. Sergio watched in silence, trying to understand what was happening. It wasn't just the cold that seemed to paralyze Laura. Something darker, and perhaps even dangerous, was consuming her. Throughout the night, Sergio tried to make conversation, to learn something about her parents, but the answers were vague, disconnected. Laura couldn't remember how she ended up on that avenue, nor where she lived exactly. The anxiety inside him grew, the feeling that something was very wrong wouldn't leave him alone. Amelia, in her chair, continued to watch them with narrowed eyes, as if analyzing every word, every gesture. Finally, she spoke, her voice low and sharp. "You'd better find out quickly, Sergio, before it's too late." What did she mean by that? Sergio shot a glance at Nayeli, who also looked confused. But the discomfort he felt near his mother made him avoid any questioning. Instead, he decided to take Laura to one of the bedrooms, where she could rest. Perhaps by the next day, she would remember something more. As he prepared the bed for Laura, Sergio couldn't shake the feeling that this night was far from over. Laura lay down, her eyes heavy with fatigue, but before falling asleep, she whispered something that made Sergio's heart stop for a moment. "I'm so sorry, Daddy." Sergio froze, his thoughts swirling in a whirlwind. Could it be just a delusion of a frightened child? Or was there something deeper behind those words? He couldn't imagine that this small fragment of a memory could be the key to a secret buried in the past. With Laura finally asleep, Sergio left the room, his hands still trembling slightly. When he returned to the living room, he found Amelia dozing in her chair, but Nayeli was still awake, her eyes filled with concern. "Sergio, that girl, something about her makes me uneasy," Nayeli said quietly. Sergio nodded, sitting on the couch with a heavy sigh. "I felt it too, Nayeli. Something isn't right." "Do you think she might have run away from somewhere? Maybe an abusive home?" Nayeli suggested, her voice hesitant. "Maybe. But what worries me is what she said before falling asleep. She called me Daddy." Nayeli's eyes widened, but she quickly composed herself. "Sergio, have you ever had a daughter? It could be a coincidence, a confusion of her mind." "I don't have children, at least not that I know of," Sergio replied, his words heavy with doubt. But the way she said it felt so real. Nayeli fell silent, reflecting on what that could mean. "Maybe we should try to find out more about her discreetly." Sergio agreed, but his heart was torn between curiosity and fear of what he might find. He knew that by bringing that girl into his home, he had opened a door to a world he didn't fully understand. And somewhere in the shadows of that world, dangerous secrets were lurking, waiting for the right moment to reveal themselves. That night, as the house sank into silence, Sergio couldn't sleep. His mind kept replaying the day's events, trying to piece together a puzzle that was still incomplete. He knew something was about to happen, something that would change his life forever, but the true extent of what he was about to discover was still beyond his comprehension. The next morning, Sergio woke up with a strange feeling of discomfort. The apartment was engulfed in an unusual silence, interrupted only by the distant sound of city traffic. He slowly got up, still reflecting on Laura's words from the night before. It couldn't just be a delusion, and the idea that there might be a deeper connection between them began to haunt him. As he opened the door to the room where Laura was sleeping, he found the girl curled up under the covers, her face serene, as if sleep had finally brought her some relief. He hesitated for a moment before stepping in and approaching the bed. Laura's expression, now relaxed, looked different from the scared little girl he had found on the street. "Laura, are you awake?" Sergio asked softly, but the girl remained still, lost in her dreams. While she slept, he noticed a detail that had escaped his attention before. A small chain hung around her neck, half hidden under the collar of her shirt. Sergio slowly bent down and carefully pulled at the chain, revealing a silver pendant with an inscription. His eyes narrowed as he tried to decipher the words engraved. "For Laura, with love, Mommy." That small object carried a weight he still couldn't fully comprehend. Who was Laura's mother? And why was she alone on a deserted avenue with no memory of how she got there? Sergio tucked the pendant back under the girl's clothing, determined to learn more about her past. He quietly left the room and found Nayeli in the kitchen, preparing breakfast. The nurse looked worried, but when she saw him, she forced a smile. "How is she?" Nayeli asked while placing a cup of coffee in front of him. "She's still sleeping. She seems calmer now, but I can't stop thinking about what happened last night," Sergio replied, taking the cup. "I found a pendant with her name on it. It must have come from her mother." Nayeli nodded, thoughtful. "We need to find out more about her, Sergio. Maybe we should take her to a hospital to see if she's been reported missing." "I thought about that, but I'm afraid of what I might find," he said, his voice revealing the anguish he felt. "What if she's running from something? And if by handing her over we put her in danger?" Nayeli pondered for a moment. "You're right. We need to be cautious. But we also can't leave her here without knowing what happened. I'll try to speak with some people discreetly, see if anyone knows anything." As they talked, They heard light footsteps in the hallway. Laura appeared in the kitchen doorway, her eyes still puffy from sleep, but with a curious expression. "Good morning, Laura," Nayeli said in a friendly tone. "Are you hungry?" The girl nodded and approached the table, sitting down next to Sergio. He smiled at her, trying to convey the security he knew she needed. "How do you feel today?" he asked. "Better," Laura replied in a still soft voice. "Can I stay here with you?" That question caught him by surprise. He expected her to want to go back home, but the reality was that she didn't seem to remember where she came from. No matter how hard he tried, he couldn't ignore the inexplicable bond that was starting to form between them. "Of course you can, for as long as you need," Sergio replied, trying to hide the growing worry inside him. "Let's try to find out where your mother is, okay?" Laura nodded, but her gaze drifted away, as if the idea made her uncomfortable. Something about the girl's behavior suggested she was running from more than just a cold night on the street. While they were having breakfast, the door to the room opened, and Amelia entered in her wheelchair, pushed by a visibly uncomfortable Nayeli. Sergio's mother looked at Laura with an intensity he couldn't decipher. "You're still here," Amelia said in a dry tone. "We need to resolve this soon, Sergio. It's not safe to have strangers in the house." "She's not a stranger, Mom," Sergio replied, trying to control the irritation rising within him. "Laura needs our help." Amelia gave a slight smile, but her eyes showed no sympathy. "Help is one thing, but keeping her here, that could bring problems. You don't know where she came from or what happened." "And that's exactly why we can't just send her away," Sergio retorted, feeling his anger swell. "She's lost and scared. Until we know what happened, Laura stays." Amelia didn't respond immediately, but her silence felt more threatening than any words she might have spoken. After a brief moment, she simply nodded, leaving the discussion for another time. The atmosphere in the house became tense after that. Sergio couldn't help but think about his mother's words and the way she looked at Laura. There was something Amelia wasn't saying, something that seemed to disturb both her and Laura. Determined not to leave things as they were, Sergio left the house later that day, resolved to find out more about the girl. He passed by the police station, but something inside him stopped him from entering, a feeling that he shouldn't trust anyone with Laura's fate. Instead, he decided to seek out an old friend, a private investigator, who could help him find the answers he was looking for discreetly. When he returned home, he found Laura playing with some books in the living room. Amelia was in her room, and Nayeli was in the kitchen washing the dishes. "Laura, can we talk for a bit?" Sergio asked, sitting down next to her on the couch. The girl nodded, still holding one of the books. "Do you remember anything about your mother? Where you lived? Anything that could help us find her?" He tried to be as gentle as possible, knowing that the answers might be painful. Laura looked at him for a long time, as if she were trying to remember something important. I remember a house. It was big and had a garden. But I don't remember where it is," she said, her voice trembling. "My mom was always sad. She didn't like where we lived." Sergio felt a tightness in his chest. Something in her words sounded familiar, as if he had heard it before, but from whom? He tried to follow the train of thought, but was interrupted by a sound at the door. Mia was there, her sudden presence bringing a wave of emotions Sergio wasn't prepared to face. "Mia!" The word slipped out almost as a whisper as he tried to process her presence. Mia entered slowly, her eyes fixed on Laura, who was now frozen on the couch, her eyes wide with surprise. "Laura, dear," Mia said, her voice choked with emotion. "I finally found you." Sergio felt the world spin around him. Mia was there, alive, and it seemed that the past he had fought so hard to forget was coming back with full force, bringing with it a whirlwind of secrets and emotions he didn't know if he was ready to confront. Sergio stood frozen, unable to process Mia's presence in his living room. The last time he saw her, the circumstances were completely different, and the pain of that moment still weighed on his heart. Now, before him, stood not only Mia, but also the evidence of a past he never imagined he would revisit. Mia knelt in front of Laura, her eyes brimming with tears as she gently touched her daughter's face. "I thought I would never find you again." Her voice quivered, each word bearing the weight of a suffering only a mother could understand. Laura, still dazed, allowed Mia to embrace her, but her expression showed a mix of confusion and relief. Sergio, still unable to speak, watched the scene unfold with a whirlwind of emotions inside him. It wasn't just the reunion of mother and daughter that shook him, but the slow and painful realization of what it meant. Laura was his daughter, and he had never known. The revelation hit him like a punch to the stomach, leaving him breathless, but before he could react, Amelia appeared at the door of the room. "So, you finally came back," Amelia said, her voice laced with cold indifference. She stared at Mia with a look that Sergio knew well, filled with judgment and disdain. "I had no choice," Mia replied, slowly getting up but not letting go of Laura's hand. "I need your help, Sergio. Things got out of control." Sergio finally found his voice, though it was still shaky. "You disappeared, Mia. You left no explanation, nothing. And now you come back like this, without warning, bringing this revelation? I couldn't come back earlier. Roberto, he became dangerous," Mia tried to explain, her words coming out hurried and desperate. "I wanted to protect Laura, protect her from everything, even from you at first. But then I realized it was a mistake. I made a terrible mistake by pushing you two apart." Mia's words were filled with guilt, but also with a raw truth that Sergio wasn't prepared to face. He looked at Laura, who was now watching the two with wide eyes, clearly feeling the weight of the conversation, even without understanding all the details. "Why didn't you ever tell me? I would have helped. I would have done anything," Sergio said, his voice faltering at the end. There was a mix of anger and pain that he couldn't control. He was hurt, but more than that, he felt betrayed. "I thought I was doing what was best," Mia said, tears streaming down her face. "But I was wrong, Sergio. Please help me now. Roberto won't give up on us. He is dangerous and he will find us." The name Roberto made Sergio's blood run cold. He knew who Mia was talking about, a man whose violent temper was infamous, but he never imagined he would be involved in Mia's life. What had she gone through all those years? And how could he have been so blind not to see what was happening? Amelia, who had been watching silently, finally intervened. "And what exactly do you expect my son to do? Put his life at risk for a woman who abandoned him? And for a child he didn't even know existed until yesterday?" Those words were like a knife stabbing Sergio's chest. He knew his mother was trying to protect him, but he also felt the cruelty in her words. Amelia had always had a way of manipulating situations to her advantage, and he knew there was more in that statement than just maternal concern. "She is my daughter," Sergio replied, his voice firm, though his insides were in pieces. "I can't just turn my back on her, or on Mia. If Roberto is a threat, we need to think of a way to keep them safe." Mia nodded, relieved, but the tension between them was still palpable. Amelia, on the other hand, seemed poised to say something but held back, retreating to her wheelchair with a calculating look. Nayeli, who had been silently watching the entire scene, finally spoke up. "Maybe we should think of a plan. If Roberto is as dangerous as he seems, just staying here isn't an option." Sergio agreed. He knew the situation required quick action, but his mind was still caught in the whirlwind of emotions that Mia had unleashed with her appearance. He needed to protect Laura, no matter what that meant, and he also knew that somehow he would have to confront the past, both his and Mia's, to move forward. As Nayeli began discussing possible plans to ensure everyone's safety, Sergio couldn't take his eyes off Laura, who was now nestled in Mia's arms. He felt an overwhelming love for the girl, mixed with guilt for all the years he had lost. But above all, he felt a fierce determination to keep her safe, no matter what it took. Amelia, still observing everything from her chair, remained silent, but her eyes revealed an inner storm. She knew that this story was far from over, and that Mia's return would bring to light secrets Sergio never should have discovered. However, she maintained her impassive expression, waiting for the right moment to act. Sergio, on the other hand, knew he was at a crossroads. The decisions he made in the coming days would not only define Laura's future, but also his own. And deep down, he feared what else might be revealed when all the cards were on the table. As night fell, he approached Laura and Mia, trying to find the right words to say, but all he managed was a simple, "We'll be okay, I promise." Mia smiled, a sad but hopeful smile. "I hope so, Sergio, because we can't go back now." And with that, a new chapter in their lives had begun, one that would bring forth not only the ghosts of the past, but also the truths that everyone feared to face. The tension in Sergio's house was palpable, as if the air was charged with the expectation of a storm about to break. Nayeli had made it clear that they needed to act quickly to protect Laura and Mia from Roberto, but the mere thought of confronting that man made Sergio's stomach churn. He had never dealt with anything so serious, so dangerous, and the responsibility he felt now was overwhelming. Amelia, in her wheelchair, watched the preparations with an impassive expression. Ever since Mia had returned, she had remained reserved, but Sergio could sense that something was brewing behind that calm facade. He knew his mother was hiding secrets, but he couldn't imagine how far those secrets could change everything. As Nayeli organized the house, suggesting ways to make it safer, Sergio went to the room where Laura was. He found her sitting on the bed, hugging a teddy bear that Nayeli had given her. When she saw him, her face lit up with a shy smile. "Are you okay, sweetheart?" Sergio asked, sitting beside her. Laura nodded, but there was something in her gaze that troubled him. He knew she was scared, but there was more than fear in her eyes. There was a deep understanding, a consciousness that something terrible was about to happen. "I don't want to go back to that place," Laura said, almost whispering. "I don't want Roberto to find me." Sergio felt a tightness in his chest at hearing that man's name from his daughter's lips. He wanted to promise that everything would be okay, but he knew that any assurance now would be empty. Instead, he pulled her into a hug, feeling her fragile warmth against him. "I won't let anything bad happen to you, Laura. I promise," he said, trying to put all his conviction into those words. But inside, he wondered if he would be able to keep that promise. Mia entered the room shortly after, and seeing Sergio hugging Laura, her eyes filled with tears. She slowly approached, sitting beside them. The tension between them was palpable, but the love for Laura was what kept them united, despite everything that had happened. "We need to think of something," Mia said softly while stroking Laura's hair. "Roberto won't stop until he finds us." "I know," Sergio replied, letting out a heavy sigh. "But we need a plan that doesn't put everyone at risk. He can't know that you're here." Mia nodded, but the fear was still evident on her face. She knew what Roberto was capable of, and the thought of facing him terrified her. However, she also knew that running away again wasn't an option. This time, she would have to fight, not just for herself, but for Laura. As they talked, Amelia appeared in the doorway, observing the scene with an expression that Sergio couldn't decipher. There was something strange in the way she looked at Mia, as if she were contemplating something important. "I need to talk to you, Sergio," Amelia said, finally breaking the silence. "Alone." Sergio glanced at Mia, who nodded, and then he stood up, following his mother to the living room. When they got there, he turned to her, waiting for her to speak. "I know you're going to try to protect them," Amelia began, her voice softer than usual. "But before you do anything, you need to know the truth. Something I've hidden from you all these years." Sergio's heart began to race. He knew that what would come next would change everything, but he was determined to listen, no matter what it was. "Many years ago, I did something I deeply regret," Amelia continued, looking away. "When you and Mia were together, I pushed her away from you. I manipulated her, made her believe that you didn't want to be with her, that it would be better for her to move on. But that wasn't all." Sergio felt the ground disappear beneath his feet. He had always known that his mother had a strong influence over his life, but he never imagined that she would interfere so directly in his relationship with Mia. "Why did you do that, Mom?" His voice came out sharper than he expected, filled with pain and confusion. "Because I was scared," Amelia confessed, her voice trembling now. "Scared of losing you, scared of being alone. I knew that if you stayed with Mia, she would take you away from me, and I couldn't bear that. So I did what I thought was necessary to keep you close." Sergio fell silent, digesting that revelation. Anger began to bubble inside him, but it was smothered by an even deeper pain. He had lost years with Mia and Laura, years he could never get back, all because of his mother's manipulations. "But there's more," Amelia continued, now with her voice barely audible. "Laura, she's not your daughter, Sergio." The shock hit him like an electric jolt coursing through his body. He looked at Amelia, hoping she would say it was a lie. But the expression on her face was serious, dark. "I knew this from the very beginning, but I never wanted to tell you. When Mia got pregnant, I knew the child wasn't yours. She had gotten involved with another man, a dangerous man. I pressured her to stay away from you, to hide the truth." Sergio felt the world around him collapse. He sat down, his legs unable to support his weight, as his mother's words echoed in his mind. He was not Laura's father, and his entire life had been built on lies. "Mia wanted to tell you, but I stopped her," Amelia continued, now with tears streaming down her face. "I knew that if she told the truth, you would forgive her, and I would lose you forever. Now I know I was wrong, that I caused pain to everyone, and I'm so sorry for that." Sergio remained silent, unable to find the words. Everything he thought he knew, everything he had been fighting for, now felt empty, a farce built on lies. "You need to decide what you're going to do, Sergio," Amelia said, trying to maintain her composure. "But know that despite everything, Laura needs protection. Roberto is her father, and he won't stop until he gets her back." The mention of Roberto made Sergio's anger explode. He may not be Laura's biological father, but he had decided to protect her, and that would not change. He stood up, feeling a fierce determination growing inside him. "You made a terrible mistake, Mother," he said, his voice firm. "But now, the only thing that matters is ensuring that Laura and Mia are safe. I won't allow Roberto to take them, no matter what it costs." Amelia nodded, seeing the resolve in her son's eyes. She knew she had gone too far, and that now the only thing she could do was support Sergio in the battle that lay ahead. Sergio returned to the room, where he found Mia still holding Laura. Upon seeing the pale look on his face, Mia knew something serious had been revealed. "We need to get out of here," Sergio said without preamble. "Roberto is coming, and he won't stop until he gets what he wants. We're going to a safe place where he can't find us." Mia looked at him, her eyes filled with questions, but she knew now was not the time for answers. The fear in her heart was replaced by the need to protect her daughter at all costs. Sergio turned to Laura, trying to keep his voice calm. "We're going for a little drive, sweetheart. Your mom and I are here to take care of you, okay?" Laura nodded, her eyes showing that she understood more than any child her age should. Mia picked her daughter up in her arms, and together they began to prepare to leave the house that had, for so long, been a refuge, but which was now a battleground on the verge of exploding. As they left, Amelia watched from the doorway, her heart heavy with the weight of the lies she had built herself. She knew that what would happen next was beyond her control, and for the first time in many years, she felt powerless, fearing what the future would bring for her son and for the two women he had now vowed to protect. Sergio drove through the city streets with a heavy heart. The car was silent, only the distant sound of tires on asphalt filling the air. Mia was beside him, holding Laura in her arms. The little girl, exhausted from fear and uncertainty, had finally fallen asleep, her small body relaxing against her mother. Mia gazed out the window, lost in thought, Amelia's words still echoing in her mind. She knew the truth was finally coming to light, but what worried her most was what would come next. Roberto was not the kind of man who gave up easily, and she feared what he might do if he found them. Sergio, on the other hand, was battling the anger and pain of the revelation that Laura was not his daughter. He knew that, regardless of that, he could not stop himself from protecting her. However, the weight of his mother's lies and manipulations still pressed on his chest, making it hard to breathe. They arrived at a small motel on the outskirts of the city, a discreet place, out of curious eyes. Sergio parked the car and looked at Mia, trying to find the right words to comfort her, but all he felt was emptiness. He got out of the car and helped Mia carry Laura to the room, where he carefully placed her on the bed. The little girl murmured something in her sleep, but remained unconscious. "We'll stay here for now," Sergio said, his voice low as he closed the curtains to block the view from the street. "We need time to think, to decide what to do next." Mia nodded but didn't respond. She was tired, emotionally drained, and all she wanted was for that nightmare to end. She sat on the edge of the bed, watching Laura sleep, and an immense weight of guilt fell upon her. All those years, all those lies, all to protect her daughter, and now the truth was right in front of them, raw and painful. "I never wanted this to happen, Sergio." Mia finally broke the silence, her voice trembling. "I tried to protect you, protect Laura, but in the end, all I did was complicate things more." Sergio moved closer and sat down next to her. The words still stung in his mind, but he knew it wasn't the time to point fingers. There was too much at stake, and he needed to be strong, both for Mia and for Laura. "I know you tried to do what you thought was right," he said finally, "but now we need to focus on keeping Laura safe. It doesn't matter what happened in the past. What matters is what we're going to do now." Mia looked at him, her eyes filled with tears. "I just wanted her to have a better life. I thought keeping her away from you would be the best solution, but now I see that I was wrong, and I feel so guilty about everything." Sergio took her hand, holding it firmly. "We both made mistakes, Mia, but we still have a chance to fix things. We need to unite now, for Laura." She nodded again, squeezing his hand. For the first time in years, she felt she could trust someone, and that feeling brought a bit of comfort amid the chaos. But the comfort was brief. The sound of screeching tires outside made Sergio jump in alarm. He looked out the window, his heart racing. A car had stopped abruptly in the motel parking lot, and he recognized the vehicle immediately. "It's him," Mia said, her voice filled with panic. "Roberto found us." Sergio acted quickly, grabbing Mia's hand and pulling her toward the back door of the room. Laura was still sleeping, and he knew there was no time to waste. They slipped out into the back corridor, trying to find an escape before Roberto caught up with them. As they ran down the narrow hallway, they heard heavy footsteps approaching. Roberto was there, and Sergio knew there was no way to escape without a confrontation. He stopped and looked at Mia, his heart pounding. "Take Laura and get out of here. I'll hold him off as long as I can." Mia hesitated, but seeing the determination in Sergio's eyes, She knew she had no choice. She picked up Laura, who was now starting to wake up, and ran toward the back exit. The panic in her heart pushed her forward, but she knew she had to be quick. Sergio turned, waiting for the inevitable confrontation. He was not a violent man, had never really needed to fight, but in that moment, he knew he would do anything to protect the people he loved. Roberto appeared in the hallway, his eyes full of fury. He was a big, strong man, and it seemed he had fed off hatred over the years. Without saying a word, he lunged at Sergio, and the two collided with brutal force. The fight was quick and violent. Roberto, in his blind rage, had the advantage over Sergio, but he refused to give up. Each blow he took, each time he was thrown to the ground, only fueled his determination. He couldn't let Roberto reach Mia and Laura. As they fought, Sergio managed to catch a glimpse out of the corner of his eye, seeing Mia escape through the parking lot with Laura. He knew in that moment that he had given them a chance to get away, and that gave him strength to keep going. But Roberto was relentless. He finally managed to throw Sergio against the wall, pinning him by the throat. "Do you think you can steal my daughter and get away with it?" Roberto roared, tightening his grip. "She is not yours," Sergio managed to reply, despite the pain radiating through his entire body. In a fit of rage, Roberto punched Sergio with all his might, and his vision began to fade. But just before he lost consciousness, Sergio heard the sound of sirens approaching. Someone had called the police. Maybe it was Nayeli, who promised to help however she could. It was his last hope. Roberto glanced toward the sound of the sirens, realizing that time had run out. He released Sergio, throwing him to the ground, and ran for the car, trying to escape before the police caught up to him. Sergio tried to get up, but his body was weak, the pain keeping him pinned to the ground. As the police lights illuminated the parking lot, Sergio allowed himself to relax, knowing he had achieved what he wanted. Mia and Laura were safe, at least for now. A few minutes later, Mia came running back to the motel, her eyes filled with tears at the sight of Sergio lying on the ground. "Sergio," she shouted, falling to her knees beside him. "Are you okay? Please stay with me." He opened his eyes with difficulty, a faint smile appearing on his bruised face. "I'm okay, or at least, I will be. The important thing is that you're safe." The police surrounded the motel, apprehending Roberto before he could escape. Mia held Sergio's hand as the paramedics arrived, their hearts still racing from the terror of what had just happened. As he was being placed in the ambulance, Sergio looked at Mia and Laura, feeling an inner peace he hadn't felt in a long time. He knew that the road ahead would still be difficult, full of challenges and painful healing. But he also knew he had made the right choice, that he was finally on the path to rebuilding his life, this time with Mia and Laura by his side. Mia entered the ambulance with him, holding his hand tightly, while Laura, still scared, curled up in his arms. The family that Sergio had always wanted but never knew he could have was now finally united, ready to face the future together, no matter what came next. We hope you enjoyed this narrative. Help us by leaving a like and subscribing to the channel so you don't miss more emotional stories that touch the soul. Share your thoughts and experiences in the comments. We'd love to hear what you think. Thanks and criticism are also welcome. See you in the next emotional video. Until then.